All right, so critical race theory is still somehow one of these massive wedge culture war issues that conservatives focus in on in order to distract from the fact that their policy agenda is overwhelmingly despised by the American people. And so I've talked about this a number of times on my channel, but just as a reminder of what critical race theory actually is in a very reductive way, it's basically just an academic lens of analysis that is really only taught at the collegiate level, where you are analyzing the history of racist laws that have verifiably been implemented throughout the history of the United States, and then saying how have these laws impacted predominantly minority communities in the United States, and how can we go about rectifying some of the disparities that still remain to this day. Okay, so that's really all it is. It's nothing controversial, it's nothing crazy, but of course conservatives are still using this to try to basically fearmonger white suburban moms and white conservative dads into believing that their children in public schools are being indoctrinated to hate and despise white people and to hate and despise everything about this country, and think that the entirety of this country and all white people are racist and irredeemable, etc. And so they're completely misrepresenting it. And we had an interview here with a Fox News host who was basically asking questions from Virginia voters, specifically to moms here. And one of these moms has a much deeper understanding about what critical race theory actually is and pushes back against this narrative that has been pushed by Fox News anchors. So this is really entertaining, and I just wanted to bring to you guys this clip. So let's go ahead and watch it, because there's a part in here that is just absolutely laughably absurd.
See a lot of learning going on, and that greatly concerned me.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of learning loss over the past year and a half. We all saw with the kids at home, and a lot of these options that you can get through the class with just a pass or a fail, and some of the measures that have sort of watered down the standards in not just in Virginia, many places. But Mara and Brooke, thank you very much.
Can I say one thing though about? I don't think people necessarily truly understand what critical race theory is. Younger children are not being taught critical race theory. They can't understand critical race theory. They're being taught history. So when somebody here in Loudoun County, I understand, was upset that his second grade child was taught that Christopher Columbus killed many indigenous people, that's part of history. That is what Christopher Columbus did. So I have a hard time. I think kids have to learn history, the good, the bad, the ugly, so they can become critical thinkers.
I don't think anybody's against that. I think we have to do a fact check on the Christopher Columbus story as well. But, critical race theory, I think, sometimes is a little bit of a misnomer, because what's happening is that there's a sort of a reformed thinking and approach to history that teaches that the country was founded in racism. You can say critical race theory is like a legal theory that is found more in colleges. So maybe giving it that label has thrown some people off. But it doesn't mean that there's not things being taught that are teaching kids that they're sort of inherently, victims or oppressors.
I think we'll have to agree to disagree on that, because I have different thoughts and feelings on that.
Okay, I got to leave it there. Thank you so much, though. And this is exactly the debate that has been so
Right, so you can see there, okay, she was absolutely flustered at even this moderate, mild pushback that this mom was giving her, okay? And she was absolutely 100% right to be giving that pushback, and she was 100% accurate in what she was saying there. All she was saying, okay, you heard the Fox News anchor, she literally could not admit, she called for a fact check on the claim that Christopher Columbus killed indigenous people. That is not even remotely up for debate, okay? Christopher Columbus, all right, and I'm not here to, talk about Christopher Columbus too much, because that's kind of tangential to what the overall point is, but it is very basic history to understand how tyrannical and evil Christopher Columbus was, okay? This is a guy who enslaved people. This is a guy who engaged in brutal punishments even for his time. He was condemned by people during his time, so you can't even use the excuse of, oh, well, it was just a different time period and that's how people engaged. No. This guy was literally mass enslaving people, engaging in mass terror and murder campaigns, and cutting people's hands and their fingers and their noses off as punishments, okay? This was a brutal tyrant even for the time period that we are talking about right now. So I don't know what the fuck you're talking about in terms of a fact check on that Christopher Columbus killed people, but that is really more evidence that we should be teaching more of these historical facts in public schools, because clearly this Fox News anchor is not even willing to accept that bare minimum claim, okay? So completely contradicting her idea that this shouldn't be taught in schools. If you're not aware of that and you need a fact check on that, then clearly this should be being taught in schools at a much greater depth than it currently is. But beyond that, on the greater point of CRT in general, okay, The Fox anchor literally admitted in that clip that they have expanded CRT from this college academic legal theory to mean basically anything that is remotely critical of the US empire and the history of the US empire, okay? She just admitted, she just said the entire quiet part out loud. One, because she doesn't know any history whatsoever, apparently, and two, because she just admits that she is not actually talking about critical race theory when she goes on Fox News and propagandizes her viewers on critical race theory, okay? They've been doing this, and this is what we have been trying to make the point about this entire time, is that when conservatives on Fox News or any of these other conservative pundits, Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, whatever the fuck we're talking about, all of these people are not actually talking about critical race theory. They're trying to conflate any criticism of the history of the United States, whether it was, as that Fox News anchor just said, that the United States was founded on racism, which I don't know how the fuck you know anything about US history if you don't think the country was founded on racism, okay? I mean, you could argue like, oh, we've made some marginal improvements here, right? Obviously, we don't still have open slavery, right? So there are marginal improvements that we can talk about and nuances about where we've left some gaps there and could use improvement. I get those conversations, but for you to not even admit that the country was founded on racism, we had literal slaves. The first however many number of presidents owned slaves. George Washington, our first president, was a literal slave owner. He was, in fact, and I just recently learned this actually, he was the wealthiest person in the country at the time. I wonder where he was gaining a lot of that wealth. This guy owned people, okay? Thomas Jefferson owned people, the same founding fathers that these Fox News hosts praise all the time and pretend like they were these glorious figures throughout history, okay? These motherfuckers were openly racist. They were not even remotely close to not being racist. So I don't understand how anybody could have an honest recollection of the founding of this country, the history of this country, not just with slavery, but the decades and centuries of prosecution beyond that in the Jim Crow era and all of this, and not come to the conclusion that this country was founded on racist principles. It just very easily, identifiably was, okay? So there's that point. But in addition to that, the broader point on critical race theory, this is how you know they're bullshit artists. This is how you know they're complete con artists and propagandists, and they're not even good at it because she is, again, openly admitting that they are frequently conflating critical race theory with any other criticism, including apparently needing a fact check on Christopher Columbus killing indigenous people. Okay, so this is how ridiculous the conservative position is on critical race theory, or whatever straw man version of critical race theory they want to come up with in the minute. They don't have anything substantive to say. This is literally just conservatives going completely against their own supposed principles of free speech and anti-leftist, encroachment on what is able to be said in the free market of ideas, or what books are able to be circulated throughout public. They are literally going and trying to cancel books that are allowed to be taught in school. They are literally going and saying, well, as the example from that mom was just using there, that you have parents showing up to school board meetings having a problem with saying that Christopher Columbus killed people. Okay, so this is where we are at in this country. Conservatives have not only no idea what critical race theory actually is, but they are not even willing to have an honest discussion about the actual verifiable history of the United States. So it's just a pure culture war wedge issue. And we know that. And so the way that you actually push back against that is not just about accurately identifying what has happened throughout history and talking about that in depth and making sure that it is covered under public school curriculum. That's step number one. Obviously, that's the bare minimum. But on another level, stop falling for this bullshit. Democrats politically need to stop diving into these bullshit culture war issues that clearly have absolutely no substance behind them at all. If you want to regain power at the broader level, then just talk about actual material economic consequences to people's lives. And moms like this person are going to be able to see through the bullshit CRT nonsense if you are actually focusing on materially improving their lives. So that's, I think, the broader lesson of this entire interview.